Absolutely. Very excited to have Dr. Zaber here. I talked to you a couple times on getting this organized. You spent some time with me on the phone. That was a pleasure. I think you were planting some pine tree when I talked to you.
We were, yeah. I'm on a board of preserve down here in the very far southern part of Cook County, and we have about 190 acres and actually a little bit of um, unplowed mesic lake plain sedge meadow and a little tract of uncut old oak sand dune forest. So that's what I focus on. I do a lot of the burning and out there. So yeah, we've been planting and it's coming around.
Very cool. Thanks. Yeah, so I was introduced to Dr. Zaber through the Environmental Law and Policy Group. So this is an environmental, obviously, law and advocacy group. So I was reading about them and their efforts to halt a logging project up on the Chequamegon Nicolet National Forest. That project is scheduled to chop down about 12,000 acres of mostly old growth forest, if I'm not mistaken. That area, that part of that forest is where we visit a lot during our Hiles foray. So it's a huge area up where we like to go look for mushrooms and enjoy nature. And it's a lot of it's slated to just get cut down. Um, so Dr. Zaber, I'm not entirely sure where you plug in with those folks, and you must work with them. They must have hired you to do some work with that. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, I'd be happy to just, fill you in a little bit if you want me to do that.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, thanks so much for having me, and I apologize for having to delay the talk a little bit. I had a torn retina in September, which was a nightmare. It's still not perfect, and but I can see, and I'm back doing things, so I'm really pleased with that. Had good health care, luckily. But with regards to this, and again, thanks so much for having us. I'm glad you were able to find Environmental Law and Policy Center. Their main office is down here in Chicago, but they have regional offices and one up in Madison. And I've worked with them for quite a long time. Gosh, I started getting involved on forests back in the 1980s when I was reading about what was happening in the Siskiyou National Forest, the world's most diverse, biologically diverse conifer forest in southwestern Oregon, and the heavy logging going on. And then I spent a lot of time in Northern Rockies and witnessed some, 500, 600-year-old cedars being cut along the Selway River, and just began to get more and more interested. I've always been interested in the environment. And so upon moving up to do my PhD at Michigan, I began to get more involved in the Upper Midwest National Forests as a student. And in fact, one of the first things I ever did was file a formal complaint against the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources for trashing the ski trail around Pallet Lake on the Northern Highlands National State Forest. I had been walking in there, and that's got a small tract of old growth around Pallet and Escanaba Lake. And lo and behold, they had gone in and hit it with bulldozers. I have pictures of the ski trail signs on the side. And given my nature, I wasn't about to sit back and take that. And so went to the local DNR office up in, I believe that must have been Minocqua or up somewhere up in that neck of the woods, and there was no real good response. So I gave a call to Madison. It happened to be that the former director of DNR Forestry Division was Jim Addis at that point, a Michigan grad, and I told him I was doing my doctorate in Michigan, and we got some action moving and helped to pass the biodiversity law for state forests using that evidence of just wanton disregard for the parameters that were set out in the logging permits. Well, to make a long story short, I started being involved on national forests in the upper Midwest. I opposed timber sales in the Superior National Forest to protect boreal owl and the last of the old growth white pine, which does not regenerate above the Laurentian due to blister rust. And then timber sales in the Hiawatha and Ottawa and a bunch of other things. And my background, I've been a wildlife toxicologist. My master's is in toxicology, and for the National Wildlife Federation's Great Lakes office. And then I was director of science at Defenders of Wildlife, where I worked on the National Forest Management Act revisions and protection of the Alexander archipelago wolf and Queen Charlotte goshawk out in on the West Coast. And so since then, I've been involved. I was at the Arboretum at Wisconsin for 6 years, and then I'm a visiting professor at Northern Illinois University, and then working with the LPC. Back in 2001, I believe it was, George Bush was elected, and there was a proposal for 55,000 acres of new logging on the Chequamegon Nicolet. And so I had been the Sierra Club's Forestry Committee chair at that point, started to get involved. Unfortunately, and bless their hearts, just weren't able to do the kind of work that needed to be done on forests with the Forest Service. And so I started my own group with another friend called Habitat Education Center. And we have been the only organization that has successfully sued the U.S. Forest Service in Wisconsin on wildlife and timber sales ever. The first one I wrote myself was an appeal of a big project up near called the Cayuga, south of Ashland. And we won all 3 of those sales with Environmental Law and Policy Center representing us. And since that time, well, we got some good results from that. We got 10-year moratoriums in the most important areas for a couple wildlife species, things that need old trees. And again, make a long story short, time passes, things have changed. I have moved down back to Chicago for a variety of reasons, but still maintain activity with the forests. And it hasn't slowed down. So I'll go ahead and just get started if that's okay. I can throw this up. And anytime anybody has a comment or a question, don't hesitate, please. So, well, as I mentioned, I've been doing this for quite a long time, and I wish I had better news. I'm not a doomer. I believe in optimism and hope, and but I also believe or strongly feel that we've had a lot of lessons that the agencies haven't learned. And if they have, there's often so much political interference from on top that the right thing doesn't get done. So to sort of, let's see here, I'll push this over to the side. Just the background, about 1.5 million acres. Certainly not all of that is forest. I think about 1.3 million is actually owned by the federal government. There's a lot of in-holdings. Most of that was bought by the federal government or reverted through tax forfeiture after the overcutting that went on. But even after that, there was quite a bit of old trees left, and it wasn't completely devastated in all areas. And then over time, the trees started coming back, the forest cover was restored in the region. But what happened was with those early successional species that colonized the cut over and burnt over forest lands is a lot of aspen. You went from maybe 10, 15% of it, the forest being aspen to 80 and 90% of many of these areas being aspen. And then what happened was a pulp and paper industry and oriented strand board or manufactured wood industry emerges around that new resource of early successional forests. And from that point on, you have a huge economic pressure to have what we would call ecologically catastrophic disturbance that continues to promote the early successional aspen, popple, and things like that that were never at this level. And so you have that real economic pressure combined with the pressure for hunting early successional species like grouse and deer. And so, let's see here. I guess, oops, sorry. So just to give you an idea where it is, this is the Ottawa National Forest in the Upper Peninsula. This is the western side of the Chequamegon Nicolet. So this is the Chequamegon side. This is the Nicolet side. Administratively, they were combined in the 2004 forest plan and managed together. Before that, because of a couple district rangers on this side of the forest, the Nicolet has better forests. It's not as cut over and hammered as the Chequamegon side. It was a couple individuals that do that. That's changing now, unfortunately. The timber sale, we'll talk about it in a little bit, is located right here. And Eagle River would be right here on the Wisconsin River. The Sylvania Wilderness is right up here. So as that gives you a little idea. And this was in the 2000s. This is not my words. This is the Forest Service themselves saying basically what we know that the 1987 forest plan did. These were the two separate plans. Resulted, as they say here, excessive early it should be early successional species management. Their management for early successional species created the conditions supporting ecologically devastating populations of white-tailed deer. Absolutely. Increased severity and duration of pests, damage to surface waters, soils, and really an economic doldrums in that area because of the heavy duty rent-based economies that export mass amounts of biomass with very little local value added. But this is what's happening and what's happened that they recognized in 2004. And again, it was that timber industry focusing on that pulp and paper, that early successional species cover that provides really good paper making. It also is one of the reasons we have a serious ongoing and will be ongoing problem with things like PCBs and dioxins and you name it in some of our waterways in Wisconsin. So what did they do from 87 on? Well, they failed to adhere to old growth designations. They went in and logged on old growth. They altered those landscape patterns and they really damaged things. They damaged timber viability, recreational use, wildlife habitat. Many areas open for ORV use, off-road vehicle use, the issues that accrue when uncontrolled and unmanaged ORV use. Some of that has been cracked down on. Every single road closure that I would take you to in the National Forest, I could show you violations where they've cut and go around the roads, go around the gates. And they lost wildlife viability, particularly things like American pine marten, red-shouldered hawk, goshawk, the species that either nest on the ground or need interior forest, older forest habitats, just not doing well. Plant species viability, certainly as a result of the heavy logging and road building, you have many reasons for that, not the least of which is deer browsing. Lots of fragmentation, probably some of the most fragmented national forests in the country. I believe the average road density in the Chequamegon Nicolet is about 4.5 to 6 miles of road per square mile of land on average. So many of those are closed. That doesn't alleviate the damage done. But it does prevent the public from using those roads that they paid to have built. And then reduction in the viability of lots of historic tree species, cedar, American beech, hemlock failure to regenerate, white pine failure to regenerate, a whole host of things. No matter how much they try, they can't get red pine to regenerate in many of these areas. Too many rabbits, not enough predation, too many deer, and it just doesn't work very well when you log the way they do. So here's the situation, and that's what we've got. And People argue, people will say, hey, that we've got a tree cover up there, and we do. But that's changing, and it's changing fairly rapidly, unfortunately. What we expect when we go up to the national forest is something like this. This is a stand in the Cayuga timber sale that we stopped in 2006. This is the center of the American pine marten, the only endangered mammal in Wisconsin, state endangered, the last of their breeding habitat up in the Chequamegon side in the Great Divide Ranger District. And this is near a roadless area called the Iron River. It has now been logged. It was 10 years and they were basically waiting to go in. However, it was the only area that had reproducing pine marten after we had stopped the proposed logging back in 2006. But we expect it to be like this. We expect it to have large woody debris, clean water, big trees, good moss, structural, vegetative, structural diversity, compositional diversity, and diversity at different scales. And that's reasonable to expect. Things like this, where you'd have large trees with multi-canopies and not a lot of invasives of the ground, somewhat down woody debris. These are all kind of conditions that, and some hemlock here, that would have been much more prevalent prior to even this last 40 years of logging. I just wanted to point this one out. This is the actual Sylvania, but you can see it's a little bit hard, but these are the kind of snags. These are 150-year-old trees that are now going to stand for a long period of time. It's 150 years till we get to the point where they start to die. So, excuse me, we have a real interim point where we lose that after logging. So I wanted to just focus real quickly, excuse me, one sec, on maybe what's some of the compositional and structural values of the forest. Excuse me. It's relevant to the fungus and things like that. Coarse woody debris. Y'all probably know what they are, but I'll just go through it. We have snags. We have the standing dead trees that are so important. Large logs and root masses that are exposed over time, and tip-up mounds, where the trees fall over and you have microsites created that are a little bit different, a little bit drier, a little different than the surrounding area. And that's what we should expect. I'll just bypass that real quick. So snags are these standing dead trees. And really, people don't understand, often there certainly is more living cells in a standing 100-year-old snag than there might be in the actual living tree. There's the lifespan of a snag may surpass the life of that tree, and it provides such important refuge areas and moisture holding and preventing of things like organisms like deer to overgraze in certain areas. These large woody debris and snags are just critical.
Wow.
Also, those tree cavities used by a variety of things. Sorry, go ahead. Oh, did somebody have a question? I didn't know if you did. Like this. So here's a pileated woodpecker activity. Those are species, that's that large kind of woody woodpecker bird that, you probably start to see those as you get above about 16 inches in diameter at breast height, average tree size in some larger tracts of land. We're seeing them in suburbs now. We're seeing them down here as some of these forest preserves age. And so it's kind of nice. But again, this is also in living trees, and that provides habitat for other species that sort of will colonize these standing dead trees, including fungus, as we see here. So I'm going to open this up. There's a couple species here. and I'm wondering what you guys think.
Okay, so anyone who wants to comment can put it in the chat. The
And then
text,
we'll look at the,
or can unmute yourself.
That looks like D. Daleopsis.
Mm-hmm.
and how about this?
That to me
Uh,
looks like crowding parchment or Sterrium complicatum.
Sterrium complicatum.
Let me try to write it out in the chat. So Daedaleopsis for the large brackets, and Sterrium complicatum, aka crowded parchment for the orange. We call that a crust.
Complicatum.
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 What about the lichen?
Complicatum complicatum. Okay.
All
So
right.
these would be all ones that are I believe, like saprobes. So
As you were saying, yeah, earlier. And
they're
so these
in
are on big old trees.
Mhm.
You just, in these young forests, you see some things like this, but not nearly the diversity that, at least personally, anecdotally, I've seen over 40 years and maybe 40,000 miles of travel into most every timber sale in the upper Midwest.
Yeah, and another
this-
fungal thing we see there is those lichens.
Yeah, lots of different lichens. You gotta love them. You can't just like them. So here's what we saw earlier, and again, the value. This is not a dead tree even, but the value of these larger trees as a substrate for a whole host of processes ecologically. Down logs are one of my favorite things. One of the reasons we don't see beech and some of these others reproducing is we don't have large nurse logs, which are often useful for sprouting saplings of the same species in a couple of these species. They last for 100 years. If you go even in some of the worst droughts, and I do this with students, go in and you take a handful of this, of the material from, the rotting wood, and squeeze it and have that water dripping out, is extremely illustrative of the value of these trees. They stabilize soils on slopes. There's tons of wildlife habitat there, and we just lack those across the upper Midwest. And here's one of these others. This is in one we had identified earlier. I believe
Ganoderma sugae, or
the
reishi of Wisconsin.
Reishi, there you go. How about this?
So we can see it's a guild mushroom, so an agaric type. They're clustered, meaning they're, like many of them all in one little clump.
I'll get you really close, but you're going to need the odor on this one.
Okay.
Okay. I can't, I didn't smell them. So, but that was, on dead down woody debris. This is an unusual.
Could you give me the name of what you were thinking it was?
It's Mycena inclinata or Mycena galericulata. If it smells like garlic, it's galericulata. If it does not, it's inclinata. But Mycena is terrible. It could even be semivesta peas with a little brown umbo. Mycena is terrible. It's Mycena for sure. You might just say Mycena, good enough. But Mycena inclinata is most likely.
Excellent.
Nice, and it's in the chat too. Thank you.
And then not just so much as a fungus, excuse me here, but you can see in a lot of these areas unusual lichens and mosses that develop, even common ones that have, we've got to look at things as old growth moss substrates. They're so intricate and so multifaceted that they become little microsites in and of themselves. Often you don't see some of these like this. I don't see very often in the highly managed forests. All right, this is also in Sylvania with old growth, and I believe you ID'd one of those earlier, but these are, I always call them puffballs.
Yeah, so the one on the left, which would be that bracket, I think you're saying that that could maybe be the Fomatopsis mucinae or the northern red belt polypore or something
Yes.
similar. And then the one on the right, I know people know this one. It's the only puffball, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, that is growing on dead wood instead of the ground in
No,
Wisconsin.
there's a few.
Oh, there's a few. Okay. But we can narrow it down to a species, you'd say, right, Davis?
This is the only one that's exclusive to wood.
Okay. All right. All right. This is the only one that's exclusive to wood. And I know it, but is there anyone else who wants to put it in the chat or unmute and say it?
Brooks close, but he's wrong.
Did he spell it wrong? Oh no, he just that's the old genus. So he wrote
Old genus.
Lycoperdon piriforme, and it has been moved into a new genus as happens, and it is in let me see how to say it. Apiosporina.
Apioperdon.
Apioperdon. Okay,
Apiosporina is black knot.
you're right.
They were all over the place. It was really
And I'm gonna
fun
have a go
watching.
at spelling it in the chat. There we go. Brooke added it. Great. So piriforme is fun because it means was it pear shaped?
The name actually means pear puff, pear shape.
Pear puff, pear shape. So apioperidon means pear puff, and then piriforme means pear shape. So they're really hitting the pear comparison here, and they are edible puffballs. You just have to be careful to not mistake them because they're a small puffball for an amanita egg, but amanita eggs would be on the ground. So
I like my liver, so I'll stick with you experts and
Yes.
wait. All right, so tip-up mounds, obviously really important, and they can be too much. As you get logging that's going on and fragmenting some of these forests, you have higher wind velocities that then knock down trees at the on the periphery, and then that is used as a mechanism, a reason to go in and continue to log as salvage. So and then you have a lot of tip-up mounds, but they're certainly really important. They in some areas, like in the Allegheny National Forest, many of the rarest plants are only around on tip-up mounds and perched on boulders because that's where they are not accessible to deer. And then up in the upper Midwest, tip-up mounds provide some unusual habitat that's not accessible to exotic earthworms. The wormed areas, what those earthworms do is decompose that humic material so fast that you have pure organic soil exposed to the surface without a humic layer or blanket. And that's very detrimental. And so what you're starting to see is, in some cases, plants that are only able to survive with a humic layer up on mounds where they are not going to be susceptible to warming. But in some of the early managed forests, we don't have enough tip-up mounds. Those trees are not allowed to get old enough to really blow down. Here's my friend Ricardo. He and I started Habitat Education in 2000, Habitat Education Center in 2001. That's a giant silver birch, or is it, what is it? So yeah, and rare. That'd be a great nurse log eventually. That is in the Cayuga project area. That area has been logged, but as you can see, these tip-up mounds have things growing on them and will provide some drier microclimate habitats and adding to that diversity. One thing that was interesting around here was fewer deer in this neck of the woods for some reason. There are quite a few wolves, and you have some better regeneration of forest types. That was one up north there. Do you guys see it?
We like this. This is a good edible. This is one I don't think we see a lot in Wisconsin very commonly. Anyone know what this one is?
Brooke put it in the chat.
Oh,
Brooks wrong again.
Oh my God.
Sorry, Brooke.
And we'll say Tavis believes Brooke is wrong. So Brooke is saying it's Sprasis crispa.
Spiraeus americana.
Okay, so that would be one where the Spiraeus crispa would have been a European name, but and when they saw the same looking thing in North America, they applied it to us too. And now they've done some DNA work, and lo and behold, the American area ones are being split off. That's what typically happens when you get that kind of a new name.
Well, we'll keep going on. Put that in the chat room.
This is a really good find. So Brennan, who first like kind of ID'd it when out loud, said that it is edible. There's a lot of different things you can mistake it for, so I'll put that caveat on it. But once you kind of can learn the ID, I don't think any of those things are particularly poisonous, though.
It was about double the size of my hand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we were looking at the IDs on iNaturalist for it, and it's just that there aren't a ton in our area, but some.
All righty. So what are our current conditions? We are really lacking in the large, coarse woody debris and the standing snags. And that's anecdotal because they simply have no monitoring for most of it, but any walk in any of the stands will tell you that's the case. And so part of the shortfall with Forest Service is they don't have those data, and they assume that the stand age correlates with the amount of snags and coarse woody debris. Unfortunately, that curve is what we would call it's a curve that right after logging you have a lot of it, and then it goes way down, and then only about 100 years later do you start to see the big recruitment of large trees. So that U-shaped curve does not bode well for that 80-year interim where the critters and the plants and the soils don't have that cover, don't have those that structural component. The Forest Service will often argue that fine woody debris, not the boles, not the larger logs, but the stuff from the top, the slash substitutes for large woody debris. Of course, we know that that's not true on any measure, let alone it doesn't last very long. It just doesn't provide nearly the habitat value. And again, we're lacking the data. So here's timber sale in the Chequamegon side. This is what is sometimes left. This would not be a biomass sale. If they're selling for biomass, they'll strip all of it off. And then they'll burn that biomass in local power plants. As soon as biomass began to be burnt up in Ashland, mercury discharges went way up because mercury deposition from air sits on surfaces of tree bark. And so mercury went way up in their effluent. But this gives you an idea. Those tree stumps will last 10, 15 years as tree branches. They just won't. And any snag that's left or standing tree are much more likely to be blown down and have no value. If they are standing there and they do stay in place with in the wind, they're dried out and provide very little ability for other cells to colonize, for fungal to colonize, for critters to peck holes in them. They're just too dry and hard. That's on the Nicolet side. That's a clear cut, one of the many hundreds of thousands of acres. No woody debris left at all. Here's some where they have a slash pile. Again, that will provide some habitat for a small amount of time, but the soil has all changed. That microsite's all changed, much less conducive to both soil fungal communities as well as the ones in the surface and the spout, the fruiting bodies and things like that. It's drier, it's hotter, it's windier, and it's more compact. And then you'll have invasives changing the structure of the soil. You'll also have 30 to 40 years of respiration, so there's no carbon sequestration going on until later. And then, because the timber industry and Forest Service argues you need to have young forests to sequester carbon, that doesn't happen for 30 or 40 years. Then it happens pretty quickly, but we know old forests do a better job, not just the trees, the entire community, including peat bogs. But they don't leave a lot of buffer in peat bogs. Here's a salvage sale after a tornado. Give you an idea just what we're talking about. Very different qualities than you experience prior to that. Yet no big woody debris left on the ground to provide that structural continuity, bridging this disturbance gap until the area can recover.
If I understand correctly, would you say that that was a clear cut, then a tornado?
No, so this would have been a clear cut. This would have been a logging project, not a blowdown. And this was a tornado that went through the Lakeland area and salvage logged after that, despite the fact that they'll call this marten habitat and they're supposed to leave a specific amount of large woody debris. That's rarely done. Here's an aerial view of the part up by, this is Alvin Creek. That it goes into the Alvin Creek hemlocks, which is an actually really nice state natural area off of Route 55 north of Route 70, if you guys are interested. This is all regenerating clear cut. This has all been cut. This is single age, mostly aspen. And I pointed this out because I want you to see that there's no buffers left along these areas often. Here's the timber access road. Here's the fragmented, isolated stands of leaf trees that are intended to provide the mitigation for this. And remember, that's all biomass that leaves the region. It leaves the area with very little value added. The Feller Buncher took over that's the automatic logging machine. Probably put about 8 guys used to have to work there. Now you got one guy operating that, or one woman operating it. And so economically, employment numbers are always used. Oh, we have to have jobs. If they had saved old growth in the upper Midwest and sustainably logged it, everyone would be a millionaire. As it stands, it's a constant state of economic doldrums because of this rent-based export economy. And of course, the edges are unnatural. That can have impacts on lots of wildlife. Look, here's an aerial photograph. No woody debris left whatsoever. This is a drainage down here. But as I said, road densities, these aren't even included in road density estimates, but they're there. They've compacted soils. They're the vector where you'd have, or the pathway where the human vector would bring in invasive species. And that's why you're seeing so many of the black ash swamps dying. Emerald ash borer can get into these areas. They'll only go about a mile on their own, but they're brought in on cars, people using roads that you pay for. Because there's no money made in the Chequamegon Nicolet. It's loss of tax dollars on every sale. One of the ways the Forest Service gets away with this is they say that with the road density, they were supposed to reduce that road density over the last 20 years. And what they'll say is, yes, we are reducing it by closing some roads and decommissioning some roads. That's all great. However, they're also reconstructing roads. So this is considered a road. And reconstructing, not building new roads, because they're not building new roads, they're just reconstructing, results in that. It's a new damn road. I've been doing this for a long time. It's so transparently dumb. The pretzel contortions these folks get themselves in to justify this exploitive logging, and 80% of the budget of the Chequamegon Nicolet going to timber. That's how they have to justify it. And this is what you get. That, of course, changes everything. This now has dust going hundreds of yards into the forest as trucks go back and forth. Clearly not good. Moving nutrients around, changing local microsites, and again, fragmenting the forest. They also maintain that these low quality roads, this is in the Northwest Howl, this is pine marten habitat, do not fragment and are not included in fragmenting values. And as you can see, they of course do fragment. In that sale, despite the requirement in the 2004 forest plan, this is one of the timber sales we stopped in 2006. This was in pine marten habitat. There were 3 patches in that project area that were bigger than 1,000 acres unroaded, and they destroyed one of those patches. So they reduced the large patches by 30%, 1/3, and yet are supposed to be increasing patch size. It hasn't happened. Fragmentation is increasing. And even in log areas that haven't been logged, a little bit of woody debris, but very, very little. And deer also, excessive deer. You can see lots of lack of regeneration in here. A little bit, what you can find is often where the average snow depth is, you'll see the cutoff, where the plants are cut off. Although I don't know if we'll have snow this year. And here's an older cedar stand. Again, a real lack of woody debris. Only now are these trees getting old enough to die and create that long-term legacy of structural diversity in snags. This is a deer exclosure up in the northern Nicolet. Here's where deer go. Here's where deer don't go. Probably 20 years old. So what's the result of that? Well, American marten, northern goshawk, and red-shouldered hawk are not doing well. These are the 3 species that I focused on for a long time. The American marten, maybe they estimate 300 to 500. They don't know what they're talking about. There's probably a couple hundred. And on the Nicolet side, maybe. And there's probably 100, maybe on the Chequamegon side, despite, after our lawsuits, them bringing in 100 marten from the Superior National Forest, almost all of which were slaughtered by predation, cars, exactly what we said would happen in an inappropriate habitat, where you're trying to augment the population without stopping the cause of the decline. Well, all that being said, the Forest Service decides to continue to promote and accelerate logging throughout the nation. And one of the projects is the Fourmile project, which we've been dealing with since 2020. And it's about 55,000 acres. This area is about 55,000 acres, 44,000 of which are owned by us, the public, although managed by the Forest Service. And just to give you an idea there, this is not the greatest, but this is a forest integrity map from Global Forest Watch, and you guys can download this. It's really a useful document. Here's the Fourmile project. The darker the green, the more higher integrity, lack of or reduced fragmentation, older trees, a whole set of values and factors that they look at as having high integrity in the landscape. This is the Nicolet top. It comes down like this. Here's the Park Falls Ranger district of the Chequamegon. This is the Ottawa, and you can see where all the roads are. But this is pretty decent stuff. And in fact, that goes to the reason that this area was chosen 25 years ago, or even a little longer, to have marten to put marten back in, American marten. I think they got these from Canada or Michigan. And the reason why is that they put them in this area is actually they put them right here. This is Alvin Creek. Excuse me, this is oh, I'll tell you in a minute. It's a bike area. It's a research natural area. This is Route 70. Eagle River would be over here. Florence would be here. And The darker the tint, the older the forest. Okay.
You're near
And
the Anvil Lake area there.
Anvil Lake, thank you. It was Anvil Lakes, and that's where they were put in. And down here, this is Pat Shea Lake, a really cool seepage lake. This area is the best natural origin white pine stand on Outwash Plain in the whole Nicolet side, I believe, on the northern Nicolet side. These are old growth state natural areas around Franklin and Butternut Lake, but you also have some larger ones that are wetlands, and it comes down here. In the southern part, you also have old stands. Okay. These lighter parts are not owned by the public. So they've started to log already. They marked this out, they mapped it out. That's me right there. This is a Natural Resource Defense Council scientist, and Andy Olson is behind us. And we're walking down what is called the road. And this is what it looks like after they reconstructed it. There's the car where we parked. This is probably 100 feet behind us in this picture. That's to access the area to be logged. Road building is one of the biggest costs to the taxpayer, and one of the big reasons why we don't make any money on these forests. It's all below cost tax subsidized. Well, here are all timber sales that happened all around the area. These are just ones in the last few years. This whole area has been really hit hard. And here are the 3 active sales within the project. So the Fourmile project is 55,000 acres, and they'll sell timber sales within that. And this one, and this one, and that one are going on. And there's one down here going on right now. They have mature old trees in there. It's considered some of the best area for old forest regeneration. It has some hemlock regeneration. Spent a lot of time throughout there. Nature Conservancy considers it one of the best spots for interior forest management. And it's important to note, okay, so with pine marten, American marten were put in that Anvil Lake area, which is right here, okay? This is the marten management zone. Marten have not moved more than 15 miles outside of this area since they were put in. They just don't go anywhere else. And there's a lot of reasons. Anybody with any wherewithal knowing this wildlife understands why they're not moving. And yet we're proposing timber sales, cutting the center of their last remaining habitats in the core of their reintroduction zone. And yet we know they haven't moved out of the way. However, the National Forest is such a weak habitat model. All they use is age and forest type and age of the stand as a marten habitat. So they basically say most of the forest is marten habitat. And yet it's only here where these guys do any reproduction at all. And most likely there's genetic movement maybe coming down, which is keeping them from being isolated genetically, like the Chequamegon side is. So there's a real issue here. And again, they target these areas first, not the younger aspen they might be cutting, the thousands of acres of clear cuts and 2-stage clear cuts that they're proposing in here. They go to the best spot. And because they know we've been focusing on this for a long time. Well, let's hone in. Here's Anvil Lakes. This is where they were restored. This is a state natural area. This will all be logged. That high value pine, the pinery here along the military road, all sorts of selective logging, clear cut logging, 2-stage clear cut, seed tree logging there. So we're isolating marten from that side. Now we're going to go into these stands here which is the best northern hardwoods, the brown, these mixed older forests, and cutting around them. Here, big timber, big units, here, here, here. This is the best stuff on the forest, folks, remaining, because there's been so much logging going on. 13,000 acres of logging within that 44,000 acres of forest. Yet, despite the fact that it's the largest proposed timber sale project in the forest in history, as far as I can tell, they decided to only do an environmental assessment, not the full environmental impact statement, despite it being in the center of the habitat of the last habitat of the only endangered mammal, the American marten, and a host of other species, goshawk, red-shouldered hawk, botrychium, rare plants, foam flower, you name it, cool stuff. And so what you see here is a pattern of cynical and actually dishonest operations. That's why when we do FOIAs, the judge sees when I pull up a memo that says, let's get this cut out as fast as possible, and doesn't like it. I've just pulled, we did a FOIA on Freedom of Information Act on the pine marten because of this project, this egregious tax dollar wasting destructive project. And in fact, I see where the forest district biologist says, oh, you know, we don't have to worry about some of these little stands that are marten habitat because they're too small for marten to use them. That directly undercuts their model, which doesn't include the size of stands. Now he says, oh, they wouldn't even use that. So that is going to be a useful litigation point to say to a judge, in my opinion. Here they're saying one thing, and here they're saying, the biologist saying they won't even use that habitat because it's too small, yet you don't include that. That permeates what goes on in the Forest Service in the upper Midwest. Back in the first stuff I used to do in the Upper Peninsula, they were not even citing scientific papers. Or when we found scientific papers they cited, I could see where whole sentences were taken out, which fundamentally changed the meaning of the actual publication. Those are the kind of things that were brought up, that we brought up over the years that I have specifically. And this gives you an idea of the extensive logging that goes on. Let's move farther south in the southern portion. Headwaters wilderness, lots of wetlands, but one of the better areas that could potentially have marten. Here we're going to log all these northern hardwood stands all along the border of this wilderness area, including high quality stands down here. And then there's the whole section below, number 3 here, which is all around the Argonne Experimental Forest, probably the best old forest in the entire state of any size, other than maybe Sylvania. So here's where we're at now. This is what's going on today. We've asked them to reconsider this. We've asked for meetings. There's a new tribal forest supervisor in the Chequamegon Nicolet, and Jen Youngblood, and I really believe she's getting really hammered by higher ups. One of the things that happens in this agency is what they call a walk in the woods. You get a biologist that wants us to do the right thing, that doesn't want to log something, they'll walk in the woods and convince you to change your mind. Things will be rewritten. Boilerplate materials are often used. I'll find things all the time with the wrong project name. It's all, you know, and then they'll complain, well, you bring up the same things. And the reason why is because you're doing the same problems. You fail to change. And this is what we get. And folks, this is just not sustainable. This is not sustainable on any number of ways, except maybe for short-term timber output. And, you know, you have, this is a little pitcher plant bloom, but there's so much to save up there still, but we're really having some issues with the timber sales. And I'm going to push this back here. And with regeneration. And certainly I just decided, okay, let's look through, let me do a search. And I've probably reviewed 500 environmental impact statements for Forest Service, Bureau of Land Management, Army Corps of Engineers over my lifetime. And so there's easy ways to look for the right, specific stuff. And I said, to myself, I'm going to look for anywhere they use the term fungus, fungi, what is the any of the,
Mycorrhiza.
yeah, mycorrhiza, any term that, and I search in their documents. I found three uses of mycorrhiza, all in boilerplate for the goblin fern, the Botrychium, the goblin fern, Botrychium mormo, and a couple others, plants that should be federally listed, at least one of them. They say that's important for them. Nothing else, ever. On fungus, on soil fungus, they'll just say, hey, it's fine, or not look at it. And so this whole taxonomic group that you guys are all interested, that we love and have huge values, simply go unassessed in hundreds of thousands of acres of logging and road building, despite the fact that they should be doing this. And so that's why we're continuing to move forward. The Biden administration just announced some protections for old growth. Most won't hit, it mostly won't hit, us, because we have old forests that aren't quite old growth. And that's because, as Wisconsin DNR said in 2009, the amount of old forests is declining and the amount of young forests is increasing in Wisconsin. So that's basically it. And I'm open for questions and discussion. And I really hope I got, provided some information.
I have a question right off the
Thank you
top,
so
if
much.
you don't mind.
I didn't hear it. Say that again. Sorry.
I'm sorry, Melissa. No, I had a question right off the top. Have you done any work in Menominee County with their forest management practices? I know it's a little bit hard for us to get in there and see it. I would love to see that forest someday. But have you worked there at all in comparison with how the Nicolet has been managed on that side of the state?
Well, I have been super, super honored to have been able to meet, this was in Marshall Pecor, was the forest manager up there. They took us through a tour and showed us a very rarely seen by white people stand of 300-year-old white pine. And so yes, they definitely are doing some different things. You can go to Ryla Lumber up in Minnesota, where they're managing for old growth white pine. The Menominee sawlog production, I believe maybe in 2002 or 4, it may still be the same, was greater, and this is sawlogs, there was greater than all the sawlog production in Wisconsin and Michigan from all the national forests in 1 year. For a specific year, because they are managing for longer life species and longer rotation ages. The interesting thing about the U.S. Forest Service is they will, there is not a lot of trees they're cutting that are more than a foot. They keep going in, it's just cutting a lot of littler stuff. So it's cubic feet, but they report it as board feet because they convert it and people think, oh, board feet 12 inches wide. It's just another minor thing. And in fact, their analysis, their assessment of impacts is either acres or amount of timber output, and it goes back and forth. It's whatever minimizes the apparent impacts of what they do. It's really sad. I hate to say that. And I love a lot of the organization. There's been a lot of great people. You had individuals up there like Linda Parker who were really critical for protecting good areas, but it is such a clown show now, and with congressional pressure and really a self-selected group in the Forest Service that just don't want to change. It's, there was a book years ago called The Conspiracy of Optimism, and it's worth reading. Even Don Beck, the former head of the Forest Service, he's up in Stevens Point, when we were fighting this stuff, he made the quote, "These trees are more valuable left standing." And they certainly are, especially this day and age.
Thank you.
Briefly, I'm going to read a couple questions from Brooke Reed. Unless Brooke did want to unmute himself, feel free to interrupt me, Brooke. He wrote, I have been told that the only way to manage an oak forest is clear cutting, end quote. What is your take on this statement? What is your experienced opinion on oak forest regeneration in Wisconsin?
Well, red oak is the most valuable tree in the
Quick, I'm
state.
sorry. Can I interrupt you?
Sure.
I was gonna ask this exact same question, and I just wanted to add that because I have heard this as well. And so this is like something that has been like pretty widely spread around, that like the only way to get more oak forest is to, like, when it starts getting invaded by other things, is to clear cut it. So I just wanted to add that this is a very widespread rumor.
And it's a great question. And so, like I said, red oak, most valuable tree in the upper Midwest, in the upper Wisconsin for veneer and really high value. Oaks certainly are a species that move out to new areas. They colonize new areas. They get pushed back down by, in my neck of the woods down here, they'll be pushed back by fire, and they'll move certain species out into the prairie and back and forth. And then you'll see with fire suppression more come up. Up there, where they're talking about regenerating oak stands, is they're making the mistake to think that you do regenerate oak stands. Number one, where they're doing it, let's go to Beaver Brook up by Spooner. The utter failure of oak regeneration throughout the Beaver Brook oak management experiment was because it simply didn't come back. And there was too many deer, there was too many hair, and it wasn't working even with clear cutting. You find out you get scrub. In some of the oak savanna, like a Carner blue butterfly would have, you would have fire that would cut off, that would kill back the tops, and they would kind of self-coppice and come back up with old growth roots, basically. But the type of management that they're talking about, with that kind of clear cutting, you introduce so many other problems, and you simply aren't seeing that regeneration. It's just not working. And there's the fact is, the idea is, I get where you come up with that idea, given the way oaks perpetuate and kind of move out. But we're also talking about trees that'll last 300 or 400 years. And so, then they'll come back and say, well, we'll create canopy gaps, and that'll have, regeneration of things. That may or may not work as well. So it's, again, this industrialized manipulation of a tree species that's long-lived and hard to regenerate. It's about mining these old trees, and you'll get some coming back.
So you said that, like, in the places that have been clear cut, that you find that it's mostly ash that comes back instead?
No, aspen. Yeah, no, not
aspen.
ash. Yeah.
Okay.
And,
sorry.
ash.
I wanted
No,
to
no.
clear that up.
And it's a lot of scrub and things like that. Sorry about that. But even like, so a good example is Beaver Brook up by Spooner, the state wildlife management area. I highly recommend checking it out. I've looked at it explicitly for oak regeneration. And I work with Don Waller, retired now from Wisconsin, and deer. I mean, I just put in 100 oaks that are preserved down here. We put them in over the last year. I have to protect every one because they're just getting hammered with rabbit and deer. And these would be places that you would have them kind of moving out into a prairie area historically. So
Melissa, you've been in that woods. It's right at the Serona, what do you call it? Artesian well north from there.
Yeah. Actually, a lot of us have been at a lot of the places that you discussed today, which makes this like even more heartbreaking, really. Talking about like Military Road. Everyone here that's been to Heil should know Military Road, and and a lot of the places that we've been scouting for, both at Heil's and at Cable, but Heil's, gosh, we just last year and the year before, there was just areas that were, again, totally clear cut. And you know, and at the time we could use that, like, well, I guess they're trying to regenerate oak habitat thing, but now that we know that maybe that's not so true, and that's sort of like essentially propaganda that we're, you know, being like spoon fed by someone, it makes it even worse. And so I just kind of got, I guess my question is, how can we try to stop this from happening? Like, you know, like, are you guys working with the DNR to try to like improve this? And like, is there any, you know, partnership that we can do in order to like try to, you know, make their choices be a little bit more selective and stuff? Because even if it is an area that's not necessarily old growth, it still is an area that's not going to become old growth if they're cutting it, you know? So, you know, I think that would, you know, be my question for you. Is there anything we can do?
Well, thank you for that. You did sum up a lot of cool and really important perspectives. Thoreau called it the burden of knowing. As an ecologist, I moved back down to the Chicago area to take care of elderly parents. I take care of a 95-year-old mom now. My dad died at 95 3 years ago. I grew up here. I never wanted to come back. I live in an area that has 100 toxic waste dumps within 10 miles of my house. I've got, you know, it's the second largest concentration of industry in the world for a long time. I love Wisconsin. I love the forests up there, and it is heartbreaking and it's infuriating. And, but it can be addressed. You know, in all honesty, the environmental movement in the upper Midwest has been weak. I had to start my own group and resign from Sierra Club after winning the Outstanding Activist of the Year award, because people were like, well, we can maybe save 100 feet on the side of the North Country Trail. And I'm like, I don't ever even talk to me like that. We're not going to, that's not what we're doing. We're looking at wildlife, we're looking at science, and we're going to try to do the right thing. And that's we went to court for those cases. And people were happy. There was, you know, but the forest supervisor told all the people and all the staff not to talk to Dave Zaber when I was presenting my dissertation research at the conservation biology meeting in Duluth. And luckily they all called me and said, well, let's meet. And, you know, she'd storm into offices of people. Where did Dave Zaber get his information? You know, I'm going to tell you, as I've always said, from your own files. It's all your data. You just ignore it. And so the way to do it is to, number one, educate. I am a big believer in picking a place that you care about. Don't try to do it all. Pick the place you care about. I think naming it makes a difference, and participate in the process. There's a letter going to Tammy Baldwin right now we had 19 environmental groups write to the Forest Service to try to get this timber sale slowed down, and they're just plowing ahead. They don't care. And Tammy's not been great. And she was great when she was my state rep. She was great when she was my US rep. And she's not been great as a senator on forests. Pressure on Tammy, respectful pressure, can make a difference. We want the forests to be carbon forests. You know, there are things to do. The Fourmile project needs to be stopped. And she has the power to put some pressure on Washington. That's really important. Political. As scientists, we have to be able to take our science and write it up. When you see these clear cuts, what did that do to the habitat for these critters or these plants that you care about? Put that in that letter and send it to them. That makes a difference. I have burned a lot of bridges in my life. I've been run off the road. I've been threatened for saving rivers in central Illinois and doing some of this. But it's also very heartening to win. And it's really fun to walk in the place that hasn't been cut. And so they have accelerated the cutting. They're doing less analysis. Elected officials need to hear, you guys have a scientific voice that's really powerful. And to say we're concerned that these values created by fungus are not adequately analyzed. Just that can make a difference. Excellent question.
So next I'm gonna ask 3 questions from the chat. And I'm gonna kind of go back in order. And then I also have one question of my own, but if anybody
Sure.
else wants to go before me, I'll give everybody a chance. So the first one is by Dan, and he was asking pertinently, when is the 4-mile project scheduled to start, and what is the overall timeline?
Excellent question. We're writing and we've been asking to slow it down. Those 3 timber sales that I showed you, the sorry. Oh, I think I went the wrong way. The Sunfish, they put that road in. So sorry. Sunfish right here, Golden Angel, and John Boy are the 3 timber sales that are in process right now. We want this one stopped and this one stopped right now would be, and so we can reassess this in light of the president's directive on protecting old forests and climate forests. And so that is where it stands. We don't know. They're supposed to wait for frozen ground conditions. Climate change is creating a real problem for them. So they're going to probably eliminate that best management practice and they'll trample everything even when the ground is not frozen. But we're hoping for right now, a lack of that frozen ground might have been preventing them from coming in. And we're trying to work. If I had an attorney, if I had enough money for an attorney, I would have been in federal court on this sale. I think there's enough evidence that they are selectively picking information and threatening the viability of the marten and ignoring the Biden administration. I think it would be slowed down.
So are you meaning to say that basically the sale has already happened and they could at any point be logging there if the ground froze?
Yeah, so remember, the sale I'm talking about right now is in this little area, and down here. All of this is still ready to be sold to timber industry. We can stop that. And we can even maybe stop these, but they're just like maybe 2,000 acres total of the 20 or 14,000 acres of total logging.
Mhm.
So this is where they're beginning to implement it. This project will go on for 10 years. They'll be logging under this inadequate analysis for more than 10 years. And the forest plan should have been updated every 10 years. It was 2004. So it's what, 20 years old. All outdated, all based on outdated science, yet still had pointed out all the problems. So we have a lot of time to protect some of these really important areas, including this. And it's because it's not all lost yet.
Okay, so I'm gonna
And
ask.
we don't know the timing either on when these sales commit. We tell the Forest Service to tell us when they're putting those up for sale. Those the actual logging projects within the overall project.
Right, so you would say there's probably not a ton of very clear announcements of timelines and things.
They don't want to know the public to know anything. That's why they keep buffer strips along roads so people don't look 50 feet beyond the road to the cuts. That's why when they mark timber, they'll mark them so you don't see those blue dots from the road. They'll mark it so you walk into the forest and turn towards the road, and then you'll see them because they're not proud of what they do and there's no defense of it. That's why they have to hide it. I'm sorry to be so harsh, folks. I've been doing this for so long, and it's so frustrating to sit with scientists who tell me the marten's doing fine, and I say, how many are there? And they say, I don't know.
We're right there with you. And we share a lot of those same frustrations and think some of us maybe more or less are very aware of sleazy things that go on and how hard it is to just watch it happen.
If you there's a couple, if you look just type in Zaber and Fourmile, you'll see some of the new the public radio articles that they did. A couple nice things. We even had, so the Green Fire, your local group there in Wisconsin, they came out against us because they're all DNR people and their logger guy, you know, I think we pretty much put a kibosh on him talking publicly against us, but he came out saying, blah, 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 we're against all logging. Absolute rubbish. If you look at every one of our appeals and our litigation, we never asked for more than 30, 40, 45% to be deferred. There's half of that logging could go on. You can restore pine plantations. You can do it the right way. It's just that they're not.
David, you said that the money for a lawyer was your main impediment right now?
And getting a good lawyer
And
that
getting a
knows
good
something.
lawyer?
I've had to bring multiple lawyers up to speed on the science. We don't have a good coverage by the big environmental groups. Environmental Law and Policy Center are good folks, but it's just tough. It's tough. I should have been a lawyer, not a scientist.
So I'm going to ask Max's question next, and then Brooke's second question.
Sure.
Max Reinhardt asked, would it make sense to attempt to remediate a logged area with fire or sort of impose a fire with wood if there was not the biomass there? Sorry,
go ahead.
No, I was going to reinterpret it, but I think
Please do. No, reinterpret it. Go ahead.
Just like rereading it, just like basically does fire remediate logged areas? Does it help to remediate?
So like a controlled burn, and yeah, so down here, I always, when I talk about invasives, we talk about it as cancer. Yeah, cut it out, treat it, and restore the process. And in prairies and oak forests, it's fire down here. And up there, these were really called asbestos forests because they were so moist they didn't burn a lot. You know, your fire interval up there, despite the henny penny claims of the agencies and the loggers, probably intervals of 1,000 years for fire, except in jack pine barrens. Then you'd have more frequent fire, and jack pine barrens would that jack pine needs fire to open those cones. So that would be on the western side of the state, and maybe up by Florence a little bit, in the spread eagle barrens. But yeah, it's fire is important. These would not be fire managed areas. One thing that I would do is if you had, you know, instead of having, if you don't have any big trees and you're trying to restore, you take some of these smaller trees, maybe 6-8 inches in diameter, and you lay them parallel to each other as a tripod, as a triangle, to create the microhabitat underneath that keeps the moisture in, that sort of thing. But once that you're clear cut, you're talking 50 to 100 years before you're really seeing any kind of, you know, recovery and carbon sequestration at a level that doesn't, that exceeds the respiration in the soil. And then also remember, the last thing I say is many of these, you know, in the aspen stands, you're talking about clear cutting and removing the biomass 2-3 times over. That's never been done in any of these ecosystems. So those are huge experiments on massive scales.
I was just going to say, just to bring it back to, you know, the club and some of our personal, you know, interest or whatever, obviously trees have a lot to do with, you know, fungi, and old growth is these types of areas. If we are losing them, you know, we could be losing really important microclimates that we might not, because a lot of people in this room probably already know, but some may not, that, you know, fungi are very, very understudied, and we don't know a lot of the species that we don't know yet, you know? And so these type of habitats could be the only area where certain fungi grow, and we might not know that, and we could be losing them by, you know, the bushels. So, you know, it's like, it's hard to, you know, put it into words in a way, but it's like, we don't even know what we're losing.
Right.
You put it into words very well. That's exactly right. And there's been a lot of people that have talked about this. Every time you go in, you just knock it down a little bit and you simplify these ecosystems. Fungi are totally understudied, as are so many components. But you absolutely summed it up perfectly. It's exactly right. And we've already lost lots of microhabitats. It's just, and now with climate change, there's no evidence that we're going to get 100-year-old trees again. Not with climate changing like it is. And so it's all hubris. It's arrogant hubris and fomented by money. We know exploitation comes when you have the technology and the extra local profit motive, whether it was the Cree Indians wiping out the beaver or everybody cutting down these trees. It's that, and they have the technology to do it, and they are doing it, and it's accelerating. And so,
Do you think it
like,
could be ignorance as well? Like they just don't understand really what the situation is?
well, I would give that to them until our 25 and 30-page scientifically supported documents come in. Then they can't claim ignorance. It's not ignorance. It's ignorance in the public. These guys know and gals know what you're talking about. 35 families that are powerful logging interests in Wisconsin, and really, Tom Tiffany and some of these clowns that are just forcing this logging, and think I'm an idiot. And oh, Dave Zaber, he's causing us problems. I'm like, well, it's Doctor causing you problems, because you got to kind of laugh at these folks after a while. It's very, very upsetting. I've gone through this for a long time. I've walked in the areas that we've lost, and it is horrible, because it's not. I have two kids that are in their late 20s, and the young people, they're just not going to be able to see this stuff. And we have an agency that's doing it on purpose, supported by some of the most recalcitrant. And so it's political. We know what the science is. This is administrative and policy. That's what the difference. We know exactly what we're doing out there. We know. We got the science. It's been well documented. They are now trying to study the area that was clear cut that we protected in the Cayuga to see what it did to marten. And I'm like, are you people out of your minds? We know what it's doing to marten. We don't need to study it anymore. Stop doing it. And yet they won't.
But litigation does, I have seen it. Actually, that's going to be what my comment is about, that I've done field checking for a group out west called Cascadia Wildlands. And
Love them.
yeah, I mean, like, when you put together well-informed environmental lawyers or environmentally focused lawyers and a group of people who volunteer to go out and check the sites and document them in a way that they're not being documented, then that information gets, taken before. But yeah, so there's a lot that I think can work there. But one of my longstanding questions has been, like, since I did that out west, who are the people who are doing that in Wisconsin? And it seems like I've kind of run into one of them, but
me and Don Waller and Eric Olson and a couple people from Environmental Law and Policy Center, an old boss of mine at the Arboretum, an expert on Savannah, Mark Leach. He's helped in the past. Back in the early 2000s, we were really rocking it and doing some good stuff. And but yeah, it's there's not a lot. I'm actually about ready to restart Habitat Education Center. I've been dealing with pollution stuff down here, and there's just a real lack of education, a lack of knowledge, and this is where the education comes in. So it's really the 4 E's of environmentalism. First is education. Educate people on the subject. Second is endorsements. Get endorsements from prominent people in the communities, prominent scientists, prominent religious leaders, prominent people. The third is enforcement. Focus on enforcement. I've got a state complaint in, or excuse me, a county complaint in on my town I live in for failing to deal with stormwater. And I'll push that, and then when I run up into the brick wall, I'll go to number 4, the 4th E, embarrassment. So whether it's taking pictures of the CEO of Home Depot and putting out life-size cutouts of him in clear cuts on Victoria Island of British Columbia, old growth, and naming them after Home Depot, immediately adopts Rainforest Action Network's policy. So embarrass, don't hesitate. They're just people. This is just people screwing things up for other people. And it's not about being rude. I can be rude sometimes, but it's also about not stopping. They just have to respond. We just did another FOIA because they said they won't let us have the document that established these landscape analysis and design areas, a lot of these research natural areas that Linda Parker did. No, it's not public. So we'll FOIA it, make you do more work, gum you up in your office. And part of it is just to slow you down so you can't implement these sales so fast. And the hemorrhage of this is we are being asked to pay to destroy our public lands and to damage them. And that's the most outrageous part about this. Look, if you were making some money on this, that's one thing. But you lose, the last data was in the like 07, they lose about $300 an acre logging up there in the national forest. And that was the best analysis done. So, and it hasn't changed.
Yeah. I think I have heard the phrase, I think it's like socialized or public losses, privatized profits.
Socialized, privatized profits, socialized costs. So externalize the costs onto the environment and to the public. Remember, so the question on the Menominee was a good one. The hemorrhage and below cost subsidizing of federal and state timber keeps prices low for timber. That undercuts sustainable private landowners like the Menominee, like Ryla Lumber, like a guy or a gal with 40 acres that wants to manage it sustainably. They don't get the price because we're hemorrhaging tax dollars to unsustainably log public forests. And it's just really outrageous. Everybody should be and to destabilize climate and to reduce our ability to sequester, climate gases and all these things, and just making it uglier.
Right.
I tell people all the time, you don't have to know any science. It's just you don't want it like this.
Yeah, when you
That's
showed the
plenty.
photos of the lush natural Wisconsin northern forests, and then you show what it looks like afterward, and even in these so-called 10 years in restoration, you can just kind of feel it. And I know anybody in WMS who's been on the ground has felt that.
So don't lose, I'm not always optimistic, but I'm always hopeful. We're putting together, there's a lot of good science on this. There's no reason to not call Tanny's office and say, hey, it just comes to our attention that there's this timber sale that needs to be stopped and old forests need to be protected. 10 people doing that on one day, she will hear that. I guarantee you. So it does make a difference. Showing up makes a difference. And remember that burden of knowing is a tough one.
One of our comments and there's been some really great comments, by the way. Nathaniel said, thank you for the great work you do, David. Keep up the good work. I'm gonna plan a letter writing party. And that, that kind of thing, or doing a change.org document or doing stuff like that. Those are ways that we can, get petitions into the hands of our and change.org is really easy to use if you guys want to do that. And it can go right to the people that you want it to go to. Some other comments, just real quick, I'm going to kind of go through them. Glenn had said that in 2012, there was a PDF about documenting old growth forests, and it looked like the DNR had kind of then sort of abandoned that. And then Brooke says Prepodotus cinnaberinus was found by WMS one time on an old growth area, and it has not been seen since. So that's like just an example of one of the things that we could be losing in those old growth areas. Also, Kevin Throop had said it's fermented by the Forest Service contradictory missions. The USFS doesn't have a narrow mission like the NPS does, for example. Brooke obviously put in education, endorsements, enforcement, and embarrassment. And in the comments for everyone's reference. So thanks everyone. If we missed anyone's questions, feel free to shout them out now before we lose Dave, because he's been such a wealth of knowledge. But Dave, I hope you let us put this on YouTube and share it with people, because it's really been an awesome talk. Like, it's awesome.
Super,
I
super
really
good.
appreciate that. Thank you.
Can I throw in
Um,
my question? My second one. You might just say no, and then we can move on. It's this is Brooke, and I just have a question about Dirca palustris, or leatherwood management. It's a fascinating little tree that is just my favorite thing to see way up north. There,
Okay.
you see it way up north in Wisconsin, and you don't see it again until you hit southern Illinois, like way southern Illinois. And I'm just wondering if you know anything about its management. It doesn't seem to have any seedling recruitment, and I do know that it's fire adapted, but I know it doesn't transplant. So I just wondered if you had anything to say about it, because I'm trying to find info.
The only thing I know about Leatherwood is that a guy named Bryce Leatherwood won The Voice last year.
Mm.
That's the only thing, and the only reason I knew that is I saw something on it today, because I don't watch the show. But I don't know anything about Leatherwood. I will absolutely find out, because it's fascinating to me, and I had not even known about it. So I'm going to look that up,
Oh,
and
thank,
I'll ask some folks, some botanists about it.
thank you
And it's
so
a
much.
tree. It's not leatherleaf bog. It's not the leatherleaf in the
No,
bog.
It's a
It's a
very
wo-
short tree growing to maybe 8 feet tops.
Hmm.
yeah,
And it kind of
Okay.
curves because it's very bendy.
it always looks like
David,
it's
I'm
out of The
wondering,
Hobbit. Like you're gonna find a Hobbit home right next to it.
Well,
Yeah, you can tie the wood into a knot and untie it. It's extremely flexible, natural cordage.
oh, here, all right, I got it here. I'll look it up, see what Andrew Hip says at Morton Arboretum. I will, that sounds fascinating.
And
Yeah, thank you.
David, you're such a great presenter here of all this information, and
Yes,
I'm
yes.
wondering what it would mean for us to partner with you in some fashion going forward. Like even, if you help us see your websites and where get us to the right places.
I'll
Um,
get you, yeah,
and
I'll get you the info for sure.
yeah, and just, is there anything that we might coordinate with you on?
Well, what I'd like to do is, I like taking trips up there and showing people around. It's always worth, and then finding out what you guys all know. And then, so the kind of things that I would look at would be anything of scientifically unusual components. And this is where your guys' knowledge comes in, because NEPA says if it's got some unusual scientific component that can be useful. And so any unusual aggregation of multiple species. So there was a cedar swamp in northern Michigan, way by Sault Ste. Marie. They had like 5 species of orchids or more, and they were going to clear cut strips down it when they were still cutting cedar over there. And I had an anonymous call from a Forest Service person that told me about it, and we used it and they stopped it. And so anything like that. You said there was one that's only been seen once. Any kind of rarity would be useful. I don't know if there's any federally endangered funguses.
Oh,
I'm just not aware. So
It tend to be hard to document.
Brooke, was that a no from you?
yeah, no.
There aren't any federally recognized. I do know that there are also like lichens that are being listed, but I think that's an international list that I would
Yep.
like the red list.
I look at, Botrychium mormo, the goblin fern would be a good one to get listed up there. It doesn't exist very many places, and it needs that old birch and aspen. But Glenn, I think your offer is really great, and I think we can work together. And I'll get you stuff for writing letters. We'll get you the background information, and then get out in the field in the summer. I do a lot of talks and tours with, and I like doing it because I learn and stuff as well, and it gets me going up there. And but it's every bit helps, and having your scientific minds makes a big difference. It really does, because keeps I don't know the answers to a lot of these things. You guys IDing that would have taken me months to ID this stuff. And so this is helpful, and it's helpful to have accurate scientific information. We can't afford to make mistakes. They can. I find them all the time. I can't afford to make mistakes because that'll be used. Oh, you didn't dot your T or dot your I. You must be wrong. Can't believe it. So that's really helpful, and we'll make sure you get information.
So I had an idea, and I just wanted to share it with the crew or whatever. Just because, Dave, what you do is like very important, and you had that like map of where some old growth areas are in Wisconsin, and considering we can get that information like at our fingertips, maybe we could try to do like old growth foray trail options that are events that we have coming up, and that will allow us to both monitor those areas and find what the fungal composition is of them at the, as a snapshot in time while we're there, and also maybe get people passionate about those areas and protecting them. So we will try to maybe keep an eye on that as the club and put that on our radar for things to think about when we are scouting in the future.
I think that's an excellent idea. And anything we can do to help, we'll point you out to some. We've got all this on GIS with the sand ages and stuff. So that can be really, we'd provide that and help you out. And if we, getting people to go into proposed logging stands and documenting things. When I was with the first timber, or the first, what is that Rhinelander public radio station, WXPR maybe? We brought them out, and Don Waller and I are walking with the reporter, and I look over and there's an orchid right in one of the cutting units. I'm like, oh, this is going to be destroyed, and he's like, really? And I'm like, oh, it's so fine. There's stuff out there that they simply don't look for, and they'll come out and they'll say, we're going to survey for wildlife and plants, and they're going to be, okay, are you surveying for wildlife or plants? So you're either looking down or you're looking up. But they'll say, well, we'll do both.
Well, you can't survey on one day for all of the stuff. We will find a completely different list of fungi in May, and then July, and then September, and then November. Completely different. And that also goes a lot for the plants. It's insane to survey once and think you've done it.
They're required. They're supposed to survey according to the phenology of the species. So you go out once, I'm like, well, then you didn't see this orchid and you didn't see that. And it's exactly right. It is and they'll contract out surveys. They're doing Martin surveys with tracks on snow. I'm like, you have no idea how many Martin are doing that. You don't have any idea about this stuff. And they just, we know how to document Martin, find their poop and do a DNA analysis. That's how you found lynx, which you guys in the Superior denied ever being there until they were found, and then they documented the young. This stuff's out there. They just don't want to find it. And that's why they're so desperate to get into the best stuff as fast as they can to prevent wilderness designations. They've gone in, we had 20 some odd rare to roadless areas in the Chequamegon Nicolet. I think there's probably 6 left. And so that's a perfect idea, and anything I can do to help, I will.
So that last thing you just said, the rare to wilderness area?
Roadless area review and evaluation, which happened in the late 70s and 80s, documented all the areas of roadless land in the United States. The Eastern roadless, or the Eastern Wilderness Bill, is different than the Western. The Eastern doesn't have the same size requirements. So you could have a 3,500 acre, I believe, wilderness on the Eastern side. But the Chequamegon Nicolet has the lowest proportion of wilderness, I think, of all the Region 9 forests, except maybe the Ohio, the Wayne National Forest. So 44,000 acres of big W wilderness, and most of that's wetlands. Most of it's wetlands, not great timber.
So something Melissa did kind of omit there when she was asking to collaborate, do the old growth forest. We have a 4-day event every July in Hiles, Wisconsin, right in the Headwaters Wilderness by the Argonne Experimental Forest. We work around Franklin Lake and Butternut Lake. We work around the Giant Pine Trail on Giant Pine Road off Experimental Road. Where else are we at in there? The Sam Campbell Forest, the Sam Campbell National Trail.
Shelps Lake.
That's where we work.
So you're going to be soaking in industrial timber sales. You're
We do Anvil Lake. We do the Blackjack Springs just north of Anvil Lake.
Yeah.
This is something that we would invite you to join us and perhaps give a lecture and be up in the woods with us and show us some of these places, and we could show you some things as well.
Love to do that. When is that?
The third weekend in July. It's Thursday through Sunday.
I'll grab a link to our events calendar.
I should probably join your group.
Yeah.
It's $20.
I will absolutely join that, and you'll have my information. Well, that's great. And any other questions?
I would like to do one. So yeah, Dr. Zaber, like Tavis was saying, one of the mainstays of our group is to do these forays, right? They're a half biological survey. So we are going out and seeing what we can find, as many as we can find of species, right?
Yeah.
We document this in various different ways. When we are doing our documentation, is there anything that would be important to capture? Say we happen upon something that's rare and it might be interesting and somehow could help in any way. Are there things that we need to be doing as far as the documentation of that?
Well, you have locations, obviously.
Yes. Yep.
And that's
location.
Yep. And we keep, obviously not public for a lot of things. We keep those within the groups. For wildlife, because people will exploit, like goshawk nests. They'll come in and they'll steal those eggs to raise for falconry. But that, do you take data on the habitat characteristics, the climate, microclimate characteristics, anything like that? Any physical measures when you're doing those data collection?
Those are usually pretty advanced things that we don't do.
I will say Tavis is our chief recorder, like for the group to manage our species list, and he does have some policies around that if Tavis wants to speak to them.
We do record dominant ectomycorrhizal trees, dominant endomycorrhizal trees, soil type, soil temperature, and elevation.
Okay.
And obviously latitude.
And okay, all good. And one of the things that, so for microclimate, do you look at, if it's in a forest, any canopy or that kind of thing? What's the light? Either a little light meter on your phone or something, just the amount of lux that's hitting?
We don't, because everything that we do is fully forested. We don't have edge forays. We don't have open land forays. We don't have, well, I take that back. At our Tri-County foray, we do one that was selective harvest, leaving oaks at, I think, 30 stems per acre. And now we're 2 years into that.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, please.
Oh, I was just going to say, so I had that background with doing field checking with Cascadia Wildlands, and I still have the training booklet from it. And there's like a very specific way that you look up and estimate like 20%, 40%, 60%, 80% canopy density. And it's not just about, am I in a woods or am I at the edge or am I in a clearing? It's how closely together are these trees growing?
Yeah, and you can do that. And there's some ways to do it. You can hold the thing up and look through. And also, like I say, a light meter, on the phone can really detect, in some of these forests, you're at 200 lux. In the clear cut, in a sunny day, you're at 100,000 lux. And that's the amount of sunlight reaching a surface. Lumens is the amount leaving the generator of light. So, those are the things, because they talk about canopy closure. I'm just thinking the relevant variables they use. One of the things that's really important to do is to develop the ability to refute their clearly inadequate models. When all they do is how much, is the canopy closed, and is it how old this and what type of stand it is and how old it is. that doesn't give us anything really of value, except maybe the age, and even then it's hard to say. So any accumulated physical data where you're looking can make a difference, because what we can say is, hey, here's this aggregation of unusual fungi that is only found where there's high moisture and it doesn't get any sun. Without, you know, I'm just making that up now, but I could see that being a case.
That's accurate.
Yeah, the only thing that we had talked about adding to our documentation this year was the past 21 days of rainfall.
Okay. You know, these are a lot of, for us, a lot of these are obvious. It's that they, you know, well, I could read you some things that I documented on how they talk about their models and stuff. It's just so convoluted. So, you know, we know you clear cut, it's drier, you're not going to have certain things, duh. But having that, you can't just say that to a judge or to an administrative law officer. You got to have that. 15 sites, 8 didn't have it, 9, you know, whatever.
Sure. There's probably also quite a lot of iNaturalist and mushroom observer data that could be pulled and combined with on the ground ecological data to say some of these things.
That would be useful. So one of the trends that has happened is they don't want to count anything. Judges get numbers. There's 74 known goshawk territories in the Chequamegon Nicolet, maybe 12 ever produce young. And judges would get that. Yeah, the counting critters tells us something, and counting things tells us something. And that's why Forest Service is desperate not to count and to use ecosystem management. It's, you know, it's just we're going to look at the integrative ecological system, and we think it's good. So for our management indicator species, what we'll do is here's the cerulean warbler, and we, rather than counting the number of cerulean warbler nests in areas and finding out what they need, we're going to say that they need these older forests with this amount of, you know, stand size, and we've got 285,000 acres of that. So instead of monitoring the management indicator species, which is supposed to indicate something about the system, we're going to monitor a couple things about the system and assume that they're good enough for the management indicator species. It's completely circular and not and not sensible.
David, unfortunately, a lot of sort of the philosophic efforts within the fungi communities is trying to get it to take a more holistic perspective, because fungi are the connective tissues of a forest. And so all that underground tissue. So like when you talk about, yeah, we all know that when you clear cut it, the ground's dry. Well, you know, that's obviously true. And so, but that we have, it's really just concerning that we can't, you know, bring that kind of information forward, because we really have, it's really about keeping the forest. So we agree on that. Our goal is to keep the forest so that they can grow to be a growth forest and so on. But so like I think the work that Mariah was doing out west was trying to identify the characteristics of an old growth forest, and that became a way of bringing legal action. Is there not anything like that that would help us?
I think that's exactly right, and I think that would help. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying don't take an ecosystem approach whatsoever. My dissertation was looking at large-scale relationships among indicator taxa. You know, I had 300,000 observations of fish and breeding birds in the lower peninsula of Michigan, and I had delineated those based on real watershed boundaries, not artificial squares, and showed a lot of, you know, problems with indicator species. Everything indicates something, but nothing indicates everything. And so when it comes down to it, how do we know whether our indicator works? We count it. We look at its reproductive success. What is its fecundity? Is that plant reproducing? That's how we tell whether the system is healthy, or, and I hate the term health, but the status is sustainable, where you say, okay, all these things are telling us something. And if you count them, you got to do some counting. But it doesn't mean we don't want that integrative approach whatsoever. We want that. But you end up counting living things. That's how we
Lichens
do
have
it.
often been more indicator species of old growth forest than anything. Mushrooms are often not apparent, not apparent. They don't necessarily fruit in a year like the rainfall and so on.
Right.
So, that might encourage us to look at some other species that would be better indicators.
No, I think you have to look at a whole host of things, and since we don't know, I think you bring up a really important point is if we don't know these relationships, then why are we plowing full scale ahead to obliterate that habitat? Oh, we don't know, so it's okay. And not that you're saying this at all, but that's what I hear. Just we don't have that data, so full speed ahead. And I actually have some specific phrases that say that. We just don't know, so we're not including it. And I'm like, okay. So really
I
good
just
points.
wanted to jump in real quick because there's been some comments again, and I just want to bring everyone's attention to them. And after
you do
a
that,
second, I'm actually gonna
before you
depart.
do that,
But
I was trying to
yeah.
ask them in the chat if they wanted those read out loud under their own names or not. Just to be sure.
Well, it's public comments, so I'll just say without saying names, but there's been some comments about, like, obviously we want to just recognize that there's a lot of people in the park system and there's a lot of people in the DNR who are just workers that are on the ground, who are lovely people who would actually support the saving of a lot of these habitats and sort of have actually had conversations with us as human beings about the fact that they think that certain areas are overmanaged. So we have to say that, there are certainly not everyone in these organizations has any sort of ill intent. And in fact, most of the time, the people who go to work for the forestry systems are the type of people that we partner with and that really deeply care about these areas. And they're, like profoundly impacted by this, just like we are. And, but what the people we're talking about are more the people who make these decisions on like who, like decide what get cut and the powers that be, more than like the little guys that are like out there working their butts off for the Forestry Service on a daily basis. So that does need to be said because, we have people that are in the club that, do those types of jobs and that needs to be shouted out.
And that's exactly why I said this comes from pressure from up top, and why the morale is so low in these agencies, because people did not join them to do this. And there's absolutely right. Good people in there doesn't change a thing on the ground. They're good people, bless their hearts. And I totally agree with that. What happens is when you expose what's going on, people get personally offended, and that can happen. But this isn't about any given individual that's trying to do the right thing at DNR. But this is about Tom Tiffany, and it is about it's by federal law, somebody called the responsible officer. That's a named individual in the Forest Service called the district ranger, and then the forest supervisor, and then the regional forester. So there's federal process you go through, and that's why we use the process. Because Melissa, I think it's a really important point. I've heard it many, many times. Yet I will still say that there are people that aren't doing good jobs, that are not being honest, and I'm happy to confront them as well. But the vast majority of people want to do the right thing. And when you had, what happened was when Scott Walker came in, DNR changed. But you've always had an overemphasis on logging and early successional management, and we know why that's happened. So, it's not about labeling. Yep, people do hard work. That's all great. But the system, what's on the ground and the reality shows that that hasn't been enough. And so lawsuits are never about naming those individuals. It's about getting the system to reward that good behavior in the first place, not threaten it, which is what happens.
That's great. I wanted to understand that more. One of the things that we can do as a club is to get some discussions about the alternative values of that forest, because people do, I mean, wild foraging for mushrooms is
Yeah.
a thing. There's an economic value to that. You can work, we could extrapolate on that perhaps and talk about what that value is. Because,
Yeah.
I understand that a lot of people do these things because they think the money's the thing, are we creating an economy? And there's just a lot of economy in the wild foraging right now.
I couldn't agree more. And there are all sorts of stuff, Christmas decorations. So or what is the little ground pine, polypodiums or whatever they are.
Lycopodium.
Lycopodium, they can be over harvested because people want to use it. So it's valuable. And so I totally see that. And we have to value those things. It's hard to support those alternatives when there's such a hemorrhage subsidizing this unsustainable industrial mindless logging. That's the difference. It's like it's like the trains in the United States versus Europe. We subsidize are about right in the middle of where Europe subsidizes it, but we subsidize roads so much more. So as long as there's this hemorrhage of federal dollars going to this bad policies, we're going to have some issues. And so the science makes a difference. Working with the public makes a difference. Melissa had brought up some great ideas on how to do that. It's not about personalities, except when those people make public statements that need to be counteracted, and they do. And heaven forbid somebody's feelings are hurt once in a while. Oh, well, my feelings get hurt a lot when I see a stream sedimented in because of inappropriate logging. So we can't, but really is about getting that information. The public doesn't know. They think about, and just like the question was, where there's the parks and the forest, the park system has nothing to do with the forest system here. It's the federal agriculture-based Forest Service that we're having issues with. Park Service doing great stuff. And so I feel for the people in the agency that want to do the right thing. I really do. And it's hard. And so a lot of them we don't talk to because they would get in trouble talking to somebody like me. And that's okay. I'll take the hit, and because I've been doing it for a long time, and it's too important to let a couple egos or somebody's political views, somebody be offended. Well, that's life.
I'll just personally, I feel like there's so much knowledge you have about all the workings of this. Even about the Biden forest, I didn't know about that act.
Yeah.
So how do we upgrade our own education knowledge about this to start,
I don't.
Like what would be a good like news outlet that we could follow about Wisconsin forestry, I suppose would be a concrete.
Oh, certainly reading everybody's work, as much as you. I'm not Sarah Palin. I read all of the newspapers, but you got to know what people are saying. There's great people and have good input on DNR. There's ways to do good things. I don't. There's no single document. I do read the Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission's publication called Mazaginian, I think, Mazaginian.
I'll try to look it up to put it in the
Free publication. Glyphwick does great work, and really the science they're coming out is excellent.
Lovely. Okay, so I found it and I'm putting it in the chat now, as soon as I find that tab. And then I'm going to ask Max's question next. So I've put it in the chat, and that is glifwc.org.
Yes, Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission.
So Max's question, which is nicely focused in his area, is I'm concerned about gold mining in my area of Marathon County, which seems to be imminent in the Eau Claire Dells region. Can I do anything to survey species or otherwise offset this?
I did a project with some folks fighting what would have been the biggest sand mine in Chippewa County back when they were doing all the frac sand stuff in that St. Peter's sandstone. I'm not sure. I didn't know that there was gold here. I knew there's deeper deposits. We stopped a big exploratory mining project up in the UP near Perch Lake. They wanted to drill through floating bogs, if you can imagine. I don't know where the gold is, but documenting everything on the surface is critical. Gold mining is an abomination. It's a very hardly any real uses. It's for ornamentation. It's extraordinarily destructive, certainly down in Central America, where you have mercury cyanide heap leach mining for gold, and mercury pulls it together. It's a disaster. So I don't know.
So I'm assuming like your
unfortunately.
organization that you've mentioned, which I wrote down the name of, but I haven't gotten a link to yet. The Habitat Education Center.
We're restarting it. We haven't been
Right.
active for a long time. Yeah.
Okay, so them, I mean, like on a timeline of that we're thinking of for Max, or like, so that organization as it comes back online. I mean, you've mentioned the Environmental Law and Policy Center, because I'm guessing that it's like it's really good to kind of get a trove of data, and it's good to kind of have that ready to go once you find a partner to work with. But really seems you need like a legal partner, somebody who takes it to the judges.
Yeah, I think you need both. And we simply can't do it without that scientific information. I did not know there was gold mining going on. I'm sorry to hear that.
I've found a little article about it, I think.
The people I would focus on to get information on mining is the folks fighting polymet and twin metals up in Minnesota. Polymet, Polymet, and twin metals. These are the big mining proposals that would be next to the boundary waters and flowing into the boundary waters.
Wow. So I put
Yeah.
that in the chat, so that we would look for what groups are opposing them or what their strategy is, and that would be a really good template.
And Minnesota Center for Environmental Advocacy, MCEA, is doing great work. Friends of the Boundary Waters is the other, doing outstanding stuff up there.
Okay.
Emily Stone is in that group.
Yeah, Emily Stone is someone we know very well from Cable Natural History Museum near Cable.
Okay. Okay. Midwest Environmental Advocates. I worked with them when Melissa Scanlon started that years ago. We focused on dairy waste from dairy farms, but they're a good organization too in Wisconsin.
Dr. David, thank you very much. I have to go. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Travis.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate your excellent input, Travis. Excellent knowledge. Well, I probably should run too, but unless there's other questions, I'd be happy to touch. Let's continue to touch base and we can have some phone calls and I can share some information. And there's always some, this is a huge thing. And I think getting an organization like yours, just, generating the sort of survey data, then people can use it as a hypothesis testing platform as well as management actions and helping to inform them on that.
Yeah, any last questions from people? And I'm assuming that they could also contact you perhaps by email.
Absolutely. I think Brennan has don't hesitate, email. People can give me a call, no problem.
Okay. And we might put your email in an email to all WMS members if I put together something announcing this video being up.
But I'm very interested in July, and even before then we go up, and anything I can do to help you guys. And I really appreciate you being interested in the subject, and we can make real change and we can do good things, and people would be higher employment. I think it just takes a little while. It's easier to run away from pain than to work towards good, I guess. So
yeah, I will say that one thing that kind of, when we were talking, one last comment from me is tourism up north. It's already a big industry, and a lot of it does center around the woodland up there. And I do think that people think they can have a fun time even in a degraded habitat, you know, but you do, as we've talked about, feel the difference. And there's so many different little things, whether it's collecting mushrooms for eating or for dyeing fabric or for just appreciating them. People who are into bird watching, all of these different kind of, you know, Brooke loves orchids. They're losing a lot, and a lot of things that might kind of explode into public awareness and become very popular and change kind of the scene of tourism in Wisconsin. We have some of, like, I think 4, Tavis is already gone, so he can't elaborate for me, but we have at least 4 different major forest types up north, and they all kind of collide, and it creates some of the biggest diversity of at least mushrooms that in North America.
No, it's very cool stuff. And, you know, we have to maintain deer hunting. We can't let that die out. We've got to manage the deer and diversify tourism. It's really about governance. There's a great book called Why Nations Fail. It's all governance, and that's what we can have an influence on. We can't really manage these systems. We can manage people. We don't have the brain capacity to understand the infinite permutations of ecological systems, but we do know what motivates people: sex, power, and resources. And when we see what motivates people, then we can change, because it's about changing behavior. It's really not managing systems, except for people, for me.
And people's attention, which I think is split in a lot of different ways, but we can kind of focus it. And there is a lot of people saying thank you for your presentation in the chat. Kevin Throop wanted to note that he and Erin, who's from Superior NF in Ely. Oh, I think she's from the, Superior NF might be the Forest Service?
Yeah, Superior National Forest.
Okay, in Ely, Minnesota, and they're thanking you for your presentation. So
ask if they know Chip, if they know the vet there. He's one of my best friends. So the veterinarian in Ely. Yep. If anybody goes up there, that's the vet.
Lovely.
Well, thank you guys so much. Excellent information. I've learned so much, and I'm really excited to continue to work with you guys.
Okay. Last comment from Kevin is Chip is awesome.
One of my best friends. I'll be up there next week.
All right. Well, everybody catch Dr. Zaber in Ely, Minnesota next week.
And call me Dave.
Dave.
They only have to call me doctor when I'm in a conflictual situation and I'm being deposed. Then it's Dr. Zaber.
Okay.
Let's call me Dave.
But when we publish you in the WMS newsletter.
That's true. We have a newsletter.
All right. Well, let me know the link that you put on and anything you distribute, and I'm going to join. And I look forward to meeting all y'all. And hopefully in July you'll have a nice thing up there. I can't wait.
Likewise. Thank you, sir.
Awesome. Yes. Happy solstice to everyone. Happy winter solstice. And I'm going to call the meeting soon. So any last things anyone wants to like grab links out of the chat, you can do it while I'm talking right now, or forever hold your peace until I send an email with the link to this presentation. All right.
Changes coming in the chat, so I think we're okay. Thanks for your extra time. I think we're over an hour.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, we're over an hour. Okay. Well,
sorry about that.
No, I mean, it's not just you. I'll say it's all of us. We all collaborated. Well, great to meet with you, and yeah.
Same here. All right, y'all have a good holiday, and we'll be in touch, and look forward to it. Thanks again.
Educational burden.
Bye-bye.
Yep.
Thank you.
Good night, all.